I'm Scott Ruthfield. These are my two daughters. They're ages 5 and 3. And this is the Seattle story of how you get into kindergarten. I learned a couple of years ago that I was in a mixed marriage, not the traditional kind. I went to public school, pretty good except for the Michael J. Fox jokes and race riots. My wife went to an Episcopal private school, pretty good except for being a Jew in chapel. And when we decided to have kids and we talked about education, I realized we were both planning to send our kids to the exact same kind of place that we went. And that meant we needed to have a conversation. And when I've talked to other parents, they've either had that conversation, they know they have to have that conversation, or they don't know they have to have that conversation. And in all of these combinations, they start to realize that the school system is one big paradox of choice, and that at least in Seattle, there's a lot of complexity. So my goal today is to demystify a little bit of the public and private school systems for Seattle. So let's start with public, and that's gotten a little bit easier. There's a map. It's kind of gerrymandered depending on your neighborhood, but you live somewhere, and in general, that's the attendance area for your child for elementary school. Now, maybe you don't think that one's a good fit, and you want to look around at another range of schools. Well, there is a process of public school choice, where you can look generally, but not entirely, in your middle school area for other schools. Of course, the ones that are good already have people at them, but you can still try. Each middle school neighborhood also has what's called an option school, sometimes several. Many of these go from kindergarten to 8th grade. Some of them have Montessori programs. They're also overcrowded, but they generally have a lottery. And the thing about lotteries is that somebody has to win. Now, if you're like everyone I know and you think your kids are wildly above average, the Seattle public school system does have a gifted and talented program. 3 things you need to know about that program. It starts in 1st grade. Even its most optimistic boosters would tell you it's a program in transition, and the best programs that are out there involve generally not going to your neighborhood school anyway. The bottom line is sadly exactly what you might expect. For the most part, the best public schools tie to the highest income neighborhoods, and people in Seattle really do move for public school, so that's something to plan for. All right, that's the whirlwind tour of public schools. Let's talk about private schools. There are about 130 independent and parochial private schools in the Seattle area. There are gifted schools and art schools and Waldorf schools and Montessori schools and experiential schools and religious schools of all shapes and sizes and stripes. Each one has its own philosophy. They have their own approach to education. There's a lot to learn, and the way you do it is you go on tours of every one you're interested in every fall. There's another thing these schools have in common, and that's a price tag that's raising faster than inflation. These are real numbers of what you might plan to expect for a kindergartner starting next year through 12th grade for a private independent or parochial school. Now, there are financial aid programs. They are real. Many independent schools in the Seattle area grant as much as more than $1 million a year. Many of the parochial schools have students supported by the diocese or their synagogue or their church, but there's still a financial investment and a time investment. And the time investment's a fun part too, because for most independent schools in Seattle, there's an admissions process. You write essays like, what does my 4-year-old wonder about? And you send them to play dates with kids they don't know and teachers they'll never see again. And then you stand by your mailbox on one day in March waiting to see the fat envelopes. And if that feels like the college admissions process, it's because it's like the college admissions process, but for 4-year-olds, which is exactly as crazy as you think it is. Okay, so maybe you'll think, I'll go look at the local public schools, then maybe if it doesn't feel like a good fit, then we'll take a look at the private schools. Great idea. Calendar hates you. See, you do these tours of the private schools in the fall because their applications are generally due in January. These dates are subject to change. They do their play dates in February and March. They send out their acceptances in March. You give them a deposit, and that's when you get to go through the public school choice program. And then at the end of May, going into June, you find out 2 months later, after the private school system is over, where your kid might go to public school. Thanks a lot, Seattle, for making this process really easy for new families. So why worry about this? Why not just plan to go to the local public school? Well, we're people who make 10-column spreadsheets for picking the LCD projector for your master bedroom. And here is a place where you actually have a decision that matters. And all of the research shows in early childhood education that focusing on those first few years is all about establishing a lifetime love of learning. And that is something worth building a spreadsheet for. And that's why my advocacy on this isn't for one kind of program or the other, but to try to understand it well enough to do the best things for yourself, your family, and your children. I put up all sorts of information at scottrue.com. Don't eat a lot of paste. Welcome to kindergarten.